All right, this should be update 12 for 2381X. It is Monday, November the 5th. So, not much has changed on the actual robot. The intake area is still marginally entirely the same. There's a little bit of, you'll see a spacer down there on the bar. And then if you look down here, you'll see that there's actually, if you can see it, I don't know if you can see it very well, but there's actually a second bar that sort of comes down. There you can see on that side. That helps funnel the ball a bit more. So the funnel actually works, it funnels in this way and then it funnels in a lot up top. So the ball gets centered for the flywheel. We have an ultrasonic mounted. We only need to use one because we realize that if you're hitting the field wall, you have to be perpendicular to it anyways to get a good reading. So that's just nylon screws. This is steel. We'll replace it with aluminum if we actually have aluminum pieces, but for now it'll still stay steel. That's a spacer because that's actually lower than that plate for whatever reason. So yeah, we're in the middle of wiring. I'll get into that in a second. Our intake chain is still this. It's loosened up a bit more. Now we're no longer running an index, so this chain is driving all of this, which is not a fun thing and would not recommend. Here we have a little plate. This is just for autonomous selection. So you have 8 modes here for starting positions and orientations, or 24 depending on how many we decide to actually make. And then this is for choosing the number of autons, or like which auton path to be going through. And that's just mounted on a C channel and then a bar. And then we'll probably just put in a shaft with a lock collar or something and then leave it at that, because it doesn't need to be complicated, and that's the easiest thing I could do short of putting in a plate. And this is the same way as a plate probably. So that's easier to mount. This bar is still here. This bar will toggle the flags perfectly, the low flags, so we don't need to add any other things to toggle the flags. Here's our flywheel. We changed this thing up a bit. So we changed the hood. We moved it one hole up to give it a little bit more like downward firing angle. And you'll notice that we have these sort of triangular earring plates on the side. So it's just one long screw, standoff plate, standoff screw on the other side, screw, standoff plate, screw, and then that allows us to actually get this to be the same width, or like the proper number of holes, so these standoffs are closer to being perfectly vertical. Because before we noticed that the shaft collars aren't actually like that width out, and they were causing weird angle things. So that's fixed, so these are a little bit easier now. The flywheel shaft encoder is mounted here. It's got one screw there and one screw there. You'll notice that's not perfectly straight right now. That's something that we've got to fix. It's because there's extra thickness from this metal, so I can just add in a little spacer, then it'll be okay. But I haven't gotten to that part yet because I'm lazy. The shaft encoder itself, it's just held on. There's the pinion gear. It's just held on very loosely. There's nothing really holding that shaft into place, except for friction, which is not good. So we'll fix that. But there's our flywheel gears. Same thing as always. Here's our plate with the flywheel motors. So this 5 wide is a plate that will be swapped out if something happens. So we just cut all those zip ties on that plate, unscrew the 2 screws. That motor controller here these 2 motor controllers here come off, and then you cut those wires. You can put 2 new ones right back on, and then they feed into this plate here. So you have the extension cables on one side, and then you have the 2 wire cables on the other side. You're using the same zip ties. So what you do is you cut these controllers off, you take the entire plate off, rewire it the way you need to be, and then just plug it all back on, and then screw it on so it's nice and quick. And that's most of our motors geared. So we have, this is our intake motor here. The wiring on that is just a 2-wire lead, and there's a big bundle of it there. I haven't figured out exactly how I want to wire it yet because, as you can tell, we've got bracing going all along it. So that's just there temporarily to keep it out of my face. We added on a descoring arm. If I don't use my tools here. So we've added on a descoring arm. This is super simple. We didn't have 2 wide, so 3 wide was what we used. 3 wide works just fine for whatever I care. It doesn't make a difference. So 3 wide runs all the way up. You've got a motor here. There's no bearing motor side because I'm lazy, and that just runs into a 2-section. It's not going to be carrying much load, so this was just whatever would fit. That's just a big 60-tooth gear on a screw joint. So how we make our screw joints, you screw it down all the way on one side, and then you leave it like hanging out on the other side, and then that's where you would put in the lock nut. I'm lazy, didn't put in lock nut because that seems like something extra that I have to do again, and I haven't done that yet. And also, we're going to get shorter screws or cut this screw down so I don't have to screw it all the way. And then this the entire descoring arm. It folds down here. We might shave it down a bit and then make a little bit that Phillips out so that we can actually get the entire length. But as you can see, it works okay. Could wave a flag on there if I wanted to. And then when it folds up pretty close to being in size. So this entire thing can be moved to the left side or right side depending on where we want it. It's just on the right side now because that's where we built it. Battery clip, we're gonna get our second one in there as soon as our power expander comes. We finally mounted our optical shaft encoders on drive. So these are just screws, nylon screws to go from one side all the way to the other side. We didn't actually put spacers inside because we found that if you tighten these enough, it would stay in place just fine. And I didn't have time to shave down spacers because I'm lazy. Again, those are wired just underneath there. So 1 point, 2 points, same thing on this side, you'll see it a little bit better. 1 point, 2 points, and it goes in. So that way, that leaves this entire row here open, and it doesn't run necessarily outside of the drive, which is incredibly dangerous. Here we have our tower. This is the brace for the descoring arm, and you'll see it comes down here. It goes into a pillow bearing here. So it goes pillow bearing all the way up. We could have probably done it not out of a pillow bearing, but it was easier to get our hands underneath a pillow bearing just because there's nothing there than it was to screw through that entire drive area. And that entire drive area only gave us really 2 or 3 mounting points. And that pillow bearing gave us a lot more, and that worked better. So that's what we're going to go with. And let me just go over more of my wiring. This is all temporary because this often does have to move. So this stays permanent because these two are always going to be the same length apart. That's a giant 2R extension, so that can be moved either to this side, out to back here, wherever it needs to be, whatever. You'll see here that we've got a bunch of extension wires or cables sort of hang all over the place, and they're all zip tied together. So the reason they're zip tied together is because when you take them out of the box, they are like this weird sort of shape. And then if we're running this, what is this? So this is right OSC, which is right optical shaft encoder, and you'll see it's on channel on inputs 5 and 6, and we know it's digital for sure. So that's what it's running off of, and this is going to go into this thing later, but right now we're just leaving it out because I don't know how many more things I want to put in here, and if I wire them down now, it'll be a little bit too complicated later, especially with the things that are already running across it. So then you can take something else like this. Again, you can see how we've done this sort of spiny thing to keep together, and then you'll see that these are Sonar 1, so that means this is Sonar on the front, and then here we have digital 4, and here we have digital 3, which tells us which ports that they're going into on the Cortex, and then we can just plug in our Sonar to that, and then that's all we need to do. Here we've got shorter cables for these ones, etc., etc. I'm actually running low of cables. These are the last 2 I have, apart from these ones, which are ridiculously long. And yeah, I have yet to cut all the zip ties because these are all going to have to come off eventually. But for now, I just want to hopefully leave these cables overnight or for a few days for them just to straighten out a little bit and not be so hard to work with, and short of me just ripping apart the sleeves and doing my own. What other changes did I make? These are just longer shafts, so we just cut them to size. They are not cut perfectly at all. That's okay. Margin of error is better than none. So that'll be there. And that's it.